Hey Stitch Cuties, it's Brittany with Stitches of Love Quilting, and this is the video tutorial for making the right border on your Garden Moments block of the month. This is your box 10 using your embroidery machine. So we are gonna make blocks 17 through 24. So let's talk about what you need to get prepped. This border is very similar or almost exactly alike as your left border. It's the same in how we're gonna make it, the whole principle behind how we're making it. But of course your blocks, your applique pieces are different in different colors. So make sure that you have downloaded your files. You have 4 embroidery files. You wanna have box 10 files 1, 2, 3, and 4 ready to go for your embroidery machine. Now for your cutting, you have 4 different 5 by 10 pieces in your box. Simply chop them in half. You need 2 5 by 5s approximately. We're gonna trim them all down. You're trimming it down as you embroider. So you have your pumpkin, your daisy, your tea rose, and your cottage. And then from your large cottage piece that you get, the strip, you're gonna cut your 5 by 2 inch rectangles that are your sashing. Now in the video tutorial, I'm gonna use all cottage. It's just simpler due to some fabric shortages we have for me. And I'm using scraps that we have instead of pulling from the real fabrics for the kits for you all. So you are going to see me use all cottage. I'll reference what block we're on and I'll remind you what color you need to have, but always refer back to this table for whichever block you're doing. You know that 22 and 24 are your daisy, 17 and 23 are your tea rose, etc., etc. Now you're also going to need to cut 4 pieces of fusible batting. You have 2 at 3 by 9, 1 at 3 by 7, and 1 at 3 by 8. So read through your pattern, that's step 4. Then we're going to get ready to begin. So we're gonna begin with file 1, and we are going to make it's gonna be sashing, this little pink star, sashing, this yellow striped heart, and then sashing. That's what we're gonna make in our file 1. Again, you have a PDF picture of each file in the file folder with that shows you exactly what we're stitching. And so what I've done is organized my pieces into a beautiful little pile. Let me pick it up for you and bring it into view. So I've organized my pieces following the pattern. I just read ahead and see what pieces I'm using like I always do in my applique, and I organize it in number of how I'm gonna use it. And I just keep it in a handy little pile off to the side. And then I organize my thread colors for file 1 that we're going to use. So I have gone on in my machine, let me get this. I'm gonna follow along with the pattern just like you all. I pin it up on the side for myself. So in my hoop, I've already done the first step of file. This is box 10, file 1. And I'm gonna need 1 3 by 9 piece of fusible batting. You're gonna put the fusible side up. You're not fusing it to your stabilizer, you're fusing it up so that it's gonna fuse to the pieces that you're ironing on. So this is step 7 that is stitched, and now we're doing step 8. So we're pasting our fusible batting in the outline right now. If you want to give it a little bit of tape to hold it in place, you can. If not, you don't have to. I'm not going to at this moment. Sometimes I'm a big taper and sometimes I'm not. Then what's going to happen when we put this back on, our machine is going to stitch with step 9. It's going to give us 1 horizontal guideline, which is going to guide our next step in fabric placement. Okay, so now you have 1 straight line. What you're going to do, we're on step 10. You are gonna place a piece of sashing. This is the cottage sashing, the 5 by 2. Then you are gonna take your background fabric for block 17. So mine is cottage, but yours should be tea rose. Again, I'm just using the same color fabric for the whole tutorial. And you are gonna place it right side down, and you're lining both pieces up with that stitched line, and then they're extended past the stitched line from step 7. So now when you put this back on, your machine for step 11 will do your horizontal seam line. So now you have this stitched seam from step 11. Now for step 12, we will finger press this down, and then I'm gonna take my iron and give this a nice press. I'm not gonna press all the way down because remember, we're gonna have some to trim in a minute. So the next step, on step 13, your machine is going to stitch a rectangle right here, and that's also gonna give us a trim line. Okay, so now we are on step 14. We are going to trim all this excess fabric. So I'm just gonna take my applique scissors. See, they have that nice flat blade. It just helps you trim a little easier when you're trimming in your hoop. There we go. And now we're going to take a 5x2 sashing that is the cottage, and we're gonna line it up with that stitched line, and then we'll put this back on our machine. So now that the horizontal line stitched in step 15, now we are going to finger press this down and do a little bit of a press with the iron. Don't press all the way down because we are gonna trim in the next step. So 16 is the step where we are flipping down our sashing. Now we're gonna put this back on the machine for a rectangle to stitch right here. Okay, so now we need to trim our excess fabric. So we're just gonna trim right along the bottom of that stitched rectangle. There we go. And now we're going to take the background for block 18, which for you will be your pumpkin colored piece. And you are going to just align that up right with your stitch line, and you have your right side down, so you have right sides together. Okay, so now we are going to flip down the background fabric for block 18. Again, yours will be pumpkin. And I'm just going about halfway down to give it a little press. Now when we put this back on the machine, we'll stitch a rectangle right here for us. Okay, so now we will trim our excess fabric on step 22. There we go. And now we will take a sashing, the cottage sashing, and line it up right with that stitched line. And now our machine for the next step will give us a final horizontal line for our seam. So now that seam is stitched, we are ready to flip this down and do a press. There we go. You can press all the way to the bottom on this. Now when we put this back on our machine on step 25, you want to make sure you have your white thread on. Your machine is going to stitch a rectangle right here. And then it's also going to do our quilting and the sashing, and it's gonna give us our first round of applique outlines. Okay, so now we have our quilting lines and our sashing, and we have our first two applique outlines. I am gonna turn my hoop sideways. So this is block 17, this is block 18. So we're gonna put down our piece number 1 here. And I wanna point out that these are not symmetrical, these. So if you put it, say this way, look, it's gonna look like it fits, but not quite, right? So you wanna just like turn it until it's the perfect fit, just like so. And we will give this a press. So this is piece 1 of our star for block 17. And now this is piece 1 of our heart for block 18. And you just wanna make sure, have it nice and lined up. It's a perfect fit as always. There we go. So now when we put this back on, the machine is gonna give us an outline of pieces 2 and 3 on our heart, and then the final piece 2 on our star. Okay, so let's iron our pieces on. First up will be our square for piece number 2 on block 17. This is a perfect square in the center, so no worries there. There we go. You can flip your square any way you want to on that one. There we go. Now we have 2 leaves for our, whatchamacallit, our thingamabobber, our heart. Let me get the placement guide out real fast and show you what I'm talking about. So we have 2 numbers we want to put down, piece number 2 and piece number 3. Number 2 is what we want to put down first. It's on the upper part. So just take your leaf. I have mine numbered. Peel the backing off real quick. And we're going to put piece number 2 in place. Make sure it's lined up nicely. There we go. Give it a little press. And now we'll put piece number 3 in place right after that. There we go. All right. So now when we put this back on, the machine is going to give us an outline of piece number 4, which is the outer flower on our heart. So now we're ready to iron on our flower, and I used my same flower trick I've used throughout this block of the month. I drew a little arrow up facing the top of my flower, which because I've turned my hoop sideways in front of me, will be facing up that way. So peel your backing and put it right in place. And you can use your placement guide as always to identify the right direction of your little flower. Once you have it in place, give it a press. And now our machine, we're gonna put it back on for one final applique outline for piece 5, the flower center right here on block 18. Okay, so let's iron that little circle on. The circle is a perfect circle. Easy peasy to put right in place. And give it a press. Okay, so now for steps 33 and the next few steps after that, we're gonna do some color changes. So you're not gonna need to take your hoop on and off, just like it notates in your pattern. So the first color change that we're gonna do, we're gonna take off the white and we're gonna load the 1307 petal pink, and the machine is going to buttonhole stitch both pieces in your block 17, and it's gonna do the flower center on block 18. Alrighty, take a look at your cute pink stitching. It looks so good. Now we are going to put the butterfly gold on our machine for step 34, and your machine is going to stitch the outline of your heart. Alrighty, your heart is stitched. Now we are going to load 1177 avocado, and your machine will stitch both of the leaves on your heart. Take a look at your leaves, so cute. Now we are on the final step. We are gonna load 1256 sweet pink, and the machine is going to stitch along the outside of your flower. Okay, let's take a look from top to bottom. Blocks 17 and 18 are completely stitched, as well as the sashing surrounding them. So we are gonna take this out of the hoop, follow your instructions to remove your stabilizer, and then you're gonna use this outer line to trim your block to the 3.5 by 9.5, and then you're ready to set it aside. Now we're going to rehoop our stabilizer, and we're going to load the file for our second file, so file 2 for box 10, and we're going to stitch this pink star, a sashing, and then the turquoise dots heart. Okay, so this was step 39 that just stitched. It's the outline that's 3.5 by 7.5, and then interior is 3 by 7. So you're gonna take your 3 by 7 fusible batting that you cut earlier. You're just gonna line it up right in the center, and with white thread on your machine, you are going to move on, and the machine is gonna give you one line across that we'll use as our guideline for the next step. Okay, so now you have one line stitched, not quite in the middle, but sort of across your rectangle and over your batting. You are gonna take your background for piece 19, which is cottage cross stitch, and you're going to line it up with that stitched line, and you're gonna make sure it's extending past the rectangle on the left, right, and top. Then you're gonna take a piece of your sashing fabric, and you're gonna put it face down, so your right sides together. So you have block 19 fabric face up, and then your sashing fabric face down. When you put this back on, your machine is now going to stitch your 1/4 inch seam allowance. So now you have your seam stitched. We are now going to pull this down, do a little finger press, and then we are going to, first I'll fuse the top, and then I'm just gonna do a little bit on the bottom because you don't wanna go all the way to the end, because on the next step, after the rectangle is stitched, we're going to trim. Okay, so now that the rectangle is stitched, we're moving on to step 46. We're gonna trim this little bit of excess fabric right here. There we go. Just give it a little trim. There we go. And now you're gonna take your block fabric for block 20, which is the cottage, and you are gonna put it face down, lined up with that seam, and then making sure it's extended on the sides as well. And the machine will now stitch your 1/4 inch seam. Okay, so now you are going to flip down block 20 background fabric and go in and give it all a press to fuse to your fusible batting. Now when we put this back on with white thread, your machine is going to stitch a rectangle right here to complete your ultimate trim line. Your machine is going to do the quilting and your sashing, and it's going to give you the applique outline for block 19 and 20 for your first piece on each of those blocks. Okay, so now we have our quilting done and we have our 2 outlines. I'm going to turn this sideways and we're going to put our pieces in place. Remember, the star is not perfectly symmetrical, so you may need to turn it to get it to fit. You can also use your placement guide so you have it in the right direction before you get to your actual stitching or placing it in your hoop. And then our super cute turquoise dots. Get this little piece right in place and give it a press. Now continue with the white thread, and the machine is going to now stitch the second piece in block 19 and the outline of 2 and 3 on block 20. Okay, so we have our next round of applique outlines. We're gonna take this cute peony pink And it's a square, so fits no matter which direction you turn it. Get it right in place, give it a press. And now we want to make sure we put down leaf number 2 first. Peel your backing. There we go. And then give it a press. And now we'll put piece number 3 in place. And after this, the next step our machine will stitch is the outline of piece 4, which is the cute flower. So return this to your hoop and let's move on to the next step. Okay, so we have the outline of our flower. And if you remember, I used my placement guide, gave myself a little arrow. Up is that way, so just put our little piece. Oh gosh, now I turned it as I was putting it down. That's hilarious. That way, yeah. I drew the arrow so I wouldn't do that, and then I turned it as I was putting it down. All right, so once you have it in place, give it a press. Now we have one more applique outline that's gonna stitch, so we're on step 55, and your machine is gonna give us the outline for the final piece on our little heart. Okay, so let's iron that final piece in place, just like so. There we go. All right, and now for the next few steps, so steps 58, 59, and 60, 57, 58, 59, and 60. I'm gonna take my hoop on and off the arm of the machine to talk about the color changes, but you won't need to. You can just keep your hoop on your machine. So we are gonna load 1256, and your machine is going to stitch block 19, so all of the pieces, and it's gonna do the outline, or I'm sorry, the buttonhole stitch around piece 4, your flower, in block 20. Alrighty, take a look. Block 19 is stitched, and then your flower is stitched on block 20. Now we're going to load 1045 light teal, and your machine is going to stitch around the outside of your cute little dotted heart. Alrighty, and now your cute little heart is stitched. Now we are going to load 1177 avocado for the 2 leaves to be stitched next. Alrighty, so your leaves are stitched, looking cute. Now we are on the final color of this box 10 file 2. That was a tongue twister for me. So we are going to load 1307, and the machine is going to do the final stitching around the center of your flower. Alrighty, let's take a look from top to bottom. This is file 2 for box 10, and these are blocks 19 and 20. They look really good. So you know the drill. You're going to take it out of your hoop, and you are going to use this outer line on the back. You can also obviously reference the line on the front as well, and you are going to trim your block as instructed in step 61 to the 3.5 by this 7.5, and then you'll set it aside. Now we are ready to set up for the 3rd file, and we are going to be stitching blocks 21 and 22. So let's rehoop and get started. Okay, so now you have the outside of your rectangle and then your placement guide. You are going to put from step 64 your 3x8 fusible batting right in the center, fusible side up within that inner stitched rectangle. You're going to keep your white thread on your machine, and your machine is going to give us our first guideline. Okay, so now we're on step 66. We are going to take a piece of our sashing, and we're going to line it up atop that stitched line, so it's extending past the top, left, and right of your rectangle that's stitched at the beginning on step 63. And now you are going to take your background fabric for block 21, and this is your pumpkin cross stitch, and you are going to place that face down so you have right sides together, your sashing, and then your background fabric for block 21. Okay, so you have your horizontal line stitched. You're going to pull this down. This is step 68, and you are going to press the top and then press down partway on top of your background fabric of block 21. Now when we put this back on, your machine is going to give us a rectangle, and then on the next step, we'll trim the excess fabric at the bottom. Okay, so now we are going to trim all this excess fabric. I use my little trimming scissors right here, and you just trim right up to that line all the way across. And then we will take a piece of our sashing, put it down right side down so you have right sides together, and then the next step your machine will give us our 1/4 inch seam. Okay, so now we will turn this down, flip it down, give a little press, not all the way to the bottom, but pretty close. All right, and then the next step, your machine will stitch a rectangle right here. Okay, so let's trim this excess fabric at the bottom. And then what we're gonna do is put the background fabric for block 22 face down at this line. And your block 22 background fabric is Daisy Bee cross stitch. So put that face down. The next step, your machine will give us that 1/4 inch. Alrighty, so we have our 1/4 inch seam allowance. Now we are flipping down the background fabric of block 22. Remember, yours is Daisy. And we'll iron part way down. We'll put this back on and the machine is gonna give us a rectangle. Okay, so now we have the sashing quilted and we have our 2 applique outlines for blocks 21 and 22. So block 21, we are going to put this cute little yellow plaid print. And remember, this is not symmetrical, so you have to turn it until it fits, just like so. And then our next block, 22, is our cute little turquoise dots. So I'll put that right in place. There we go. And once you have it in place, give it a press. There we go. So we're going to continue with the white thread for one more step, and your machine is going to give us the second outline on both of our stars. Okay, so now we have both of those squares outlined. You put this cute little print up here in block 21. And then this denim will go on top of the turquoise dots. And it's a perfect square, but just make sure you get it in those lines and give it a press. So now for steps 81 through 84, you do not need to take your hoop on and off the arm of your machine. I, however, will. So as always, I can talk about what we're stitching. So first up for step 81, we're gonna load Butterfly Gold 0567, and the machine is going to stitch the outline of piece 1 of your star. Alrighty, so the outside of your star is stitched. Now it is time to put the 1833 pumpkin pie on, and the inner part of your star for block 21 will stitch. Take a look, all stitched up for block 21. Now the color that we're gonna load next will be the 1045 light teal, and the machine is gonna stitch the outer part of block 22's star. Alrighty, so the outside of the star is stitched. Now we have one more thread color change for file 3, and that is to put on the 1253 dark sapphire for the center of our block 22 star. Alrighty, your third segment of your right applique border is done. Let's take a look from top to bottom. Looking good. So now you know the drill. You are going to follow the instructions for trimming. This is step 85 in your pattern, and you will use this outer line all the way on the outside as a guideline for trimming to that 3.5 by 8.5. And do remove all your stabilizer. Set this aside. Let's load file 4 for box 10, and let's load our stabilizer, and let's get ready to make our final segment of the border for the right side of our quilts. Okay, so now you have the outline of your 3.5 by 9.5 rectangle, and then your inner 3 by 9. And again, this is box 10, block 4. So we're making blocks 23 and 24 of our right applique border. So now we are moving on to step 88, and we are gonna place our 3 by 9 piece of batting right here in that inner rectangle. And we're going to continue to the next step, and we'll have our first guideline stitched for us. Okay, so now what we're going to do first is place our sashing right side up, right here at the top of the line. So again, it's extending past the top, left, and right of our stitched rectangle, the outer stitched rectangle. Now we're gonna grab our background fabric for block 23, which yours will be the T-Rose X's, the T-Rose cross stitch, and we're gonna place it face down. So we have right sides together. And then for the next step, our machine will give us our 1/4 inch seam. So now our seam is stitched. We're gonna simply take the background fabric for block 23, and we're gonna pull it down. Make sure the whole time that you're keeping, of course, your fusible batting lined up. And we're going to give it a quick press, and then press part way down on block 23, but not all the way. Now the next step, the machine will stitch a rectangle right here for us, and that bottom line of the rectangle will be a guideline. Okay, so now that rectangle is stitched, we're gonna first trim right here. There we go. I apologize, that's the doorbell in the background. So there we go. We're ready to put our sashing in place and continue to that next step. So now we have our 1/4 inch seam. We're gonna simply flip down the sashing, give a press almost all the way to the bottom, but not quite. And now our machine for the next step will sew our rectangle right here on the sashing. Okay, so now we are going to trim the excess fabric. For those of you who wanna know what number we're at number 98 in the pattern. I'm trying to remind myself to say the numbers through the steps, but I do get kind of in my flow and forget to say those numbers. You can check them off like I do on my pattern. I check off each step. So now we're going to place our background fabric for block 24. So yours is going to be the daisy cross stitch, and you simply put it right side down. So you have right sides together just above the bottom of that stitched rectangle, and your machine is now gonna give you that next 1/4 inch seam. So now we have our 1/4 inch seam. We're gonna flip down the background fabric of block 24. Again, yours will be the daisy B cross stitch, and go partway down, ironing it. And now our machine is going to stitch a rectangle in the next step. Okay, so now we are on step 102. We're gonna trim this excess fabric down here. There we go, just go right across. And now we're going to place our final piece of sashing fabric face down, right sides together, right on that bottom of the stitched rectangle, and your machine will give us our final 1/4 inch seam allowance. Okay, so now we will flip down this piece of sashing and give it a nice press, and your machine is going to now stitch a rectangle here, and you know the drill. It's going to give you your quilting in your 3 sashing areas, and it's going to give you your first applique outline of your heart and your star for blocks 23 and 24. Alrighty, so now we're on step 106. We are going to iron block 23 piece 1 and block 24 piece 1. So as always, I turn my hoop sideways to fit on my little stitty bitty, and we're going to take our little piece right here, turn it till you have it fitting. Again, you can utilize your placement guide, give yourself a little arrow so you know where the top is, just like we've done with the flowers throughout this one. And then our cute purple heart. I forgot what this purple is called. It's got a fun name. It's not lavender. What is it? Plum. It's plum. I think that's fun. There we go. So now when we put this back on, our machine is going to give us the applique outline number 2 on block 23, and it's going to give us our leaves 2 and 3 on block 24. Okay, so now it's time to iron our raspberry center on block 23 on our star. Again, perfect square, just center it in that stitched outline. And now for our leaves, as always, make sure you put down piece number 2 first, since they over and underlap pieces 2 and 3. And fit it right in. There we go. And piece number 3. Put that right in place. Super cute. Didn't these go by really fast? I know it looks like there's a lot of steps in the pattern, but really it goes by so quickly. It's really fun to do, isn't it? So now when we put this back on, the machine is going to give us the outline of piece number 4, our flower. Alrighty, so let's iron that flower in place. I have my arrow drawn up, so when I take that paper backing off, I just want the arrow to be facing up. That way I don't have to spin my little piece till it fits. And then give it a press. And now we'll have our final applique outline with the white thread, and that is the center of our flower, piece number 5. Alrighty, so let's iron that little flower center right in place. Perfect little circle right in the center. There we go. So now for the next 3 steps, steps 113, 14, and 115, we are simply going to do thread changes. I'll take my hoop on and off so I can talk about the thread. So first up, we're going to put in 1307 petal pink, and your machine is going to stitch block 23. So it's going to stitch all of this, and it's going to stitch the little raspberry center on block 24. Alrighty, so all of block 23 pieces 1 and 2 is stitched, and then I forgot to mention before, your heart is stitched in that 1307, and then your flower center. So now we are going to change to 1177 avocado, and our 2 leaves will be stitched. Alrighty, now the leaves are stitched, looking cute. Now it is time for our final color change to 1256 Sweet Pink to stitch the outside of our little flower. Alrighty, your file 4 for blocks 23 and 24. It's completely finished now. So now what we're gonna do, take it out of the hoop, and just like it says in step 116, you are going to remove your stabilizer and then trim the 3.5 by 9.5 on that outer line. Then what you'll do is just follow your pattern. You have only a few more steps. You'll gather all 4 border units that you made with your files for box 10, and you're going to assemble them into your right border. So you're gonna follow steps 117, 118, and 119 to assemble that border. If you need any help with your seam allowance, we have a video that shows you how to get the perfect 1/4 inch seam allowances, and then you also have your guide of your line right inside here. That also is a nice guideline. You'll stitch just inside of that to get a perfect 1/4 inch seam allowance when you open it up. As always, thank you so much for being a member of the Garden Moments Walk of the Month. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out. Happy stitching!